Hi folks, HR Funk here with a fun video today, and videos are always fun when we shoot things and then take a look at the results of what happens when we shoot them. And this video comes about as a result of a conversation that I had not all that long ago with Roy Kiefer. Some of you are familiar with Roy. He's a regular fixture in the Premiere chat whenever we have those on Wednesdays and Saturday mornings. By the way, if you've never seen one, feel free to join us when the video premieres on Wednesday morning or Saturday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. There is a chat that goes along with it. I'm in there, Roy's in there a lot of times. We have a lot of other regulars. It's always fun, so feel free to join us in that chat when the videos premiere. Anyway, when I was talking to Roy, he mentioned that his favorite .38 special load for his defensive revolver is what used to be called the St. Louis PD load. It's also had some other names over the years, but it is a 158 grain lead semi-wide cutter hollow point bullet loaded to +P velocities. Now, that load was first developed for the St. Louis Police Department by the Winchester Ammunition Company back in the 1970s. So it's been around for a long, long time, and obviously ammunition technology and bullet technology has advanced purportedly since those days. And I got to thinking after that conversation with Roy, do we really have more effective ammunition today than we had back in those days? Because that 158 grain lead semi-wide cutter +P load had a really good reputation back in the day when .38 special revolvers and even .357 Magnum revolvers dominated the law enforcement market. There were a lot of .357 Magnum revolvers that were loaded with that 158 grain .38 special +P load. In fact, when I was a brand new police officer with my department way back in the early 1990s, about half the department was carrying a Smith & Wesson Model 65 revolver, chambered for the .357 Magnum cartridge, but in those revolvers they were carrying the St. Louis PD load, the 158 grain lead semi-wide cutter hollow point +P, and nobody really had anything bad to say about it. So I started looking for a way that I could test these. Now, I did a lot of ammunition testing back in the day for my department whenever we switched ammunition from one to the other, or we were looking at maybe going to a new firearm that was chambered for a different cartridge than we'd been using prior to that. I tested the ammunition, and I used the calibrated ballistic gel, which was the industry standard back in the day. And I got to tell you, there's some things I don't like about it. First off, it's a pain. You have to mix the stuff up, you have to calibrate it, you have to use it at the right temperature. There's just a lot that goes along with it that makes it very inconvenient. It's a good test medium for comparing one bullet to the next or one load to the next, but when it comes to being user-friendly, it's not so much. There are some other products today that replicate the ballistic gel, but they are expensive. And also there are some things that go along with using them, and particularly when you try to reuse them and you have to melt them down and reform them and all that stuff. I just didn't want to do that. So I remembered years ago reading in a magazine for police firearms instructors about a method for using water and then converting the performance you see with bullets in water to get a comparable result to how they would perform in calibrated ballistic gel. And I couldn't remember exactly who wrote the article, but I thought I knew, and it turned out I was right. A gentleman named Dick Fairburn, who has been around for a while. He was a writer back in the day. I think he might still write for some magazines, and he also has his own YouTube channel these days. I contacted him, and sure enough, he was the person who wrote the article. And he explained to me exactly how to go about performing the test based on his protocols to get results that are comparable to what you would see in ballistic gel. Now, rather than trying to explain Dick's method for converting the performance we see with bullets in water to what we would expect to see with those same bullets in calibrated ballistic gel, what I'm going to do is put a link in the description section of this video that goes directly to a video that Dick himself produced where he explains exactly how he developed his protocol. In this video, instead, what we're going to do is go out to the range and look at 4 different .38 special loads, and I'm going to be shooting them into water, and we'll be able to look at the performance we see in the water and also use Dick's protocol to convert them to what we would expect to see in ballistic gel. I also am going to be testing one 357 Magnum load just because I happen to have it with me and I was having a good time. Now, one thing that I wanted to do when I was at the range was get velocity readings with the actual ammunition that I was shooting. So I positioned my chronograph right in front of the water. In this case, the water was contained in milk jugs, with the idea that I was going to get the closest velocity I could to the impact velocity of those bullets when they struck the milk jug. This seemed like a good idea at the time, but I think I might have drowned my chronograph. I'm still waiting for it to dry out. I'm not entirely sure it's going to survive, but the bottom line is I was not able to get any velocity readings while I was actually shooting. So I'm going to have to use published velocities for these different loads, but I think that's going to be okay because since what we're really looking at in this video is the penetration and expansion characteristics of these bullets, penetration and expansion are a result of the energy imparted to the bullets by velocity. So if we see good penetration and good expansion, whatever the velocity was going to be good enough to achieve those results. If we don't see good penetration and expansion, then it doesn't matter what the velocity was because we didn't get good results. So I think it'll be okay to use the published velocities for what we're trying to accomplish here. A couple of last points that I want to make before we head out to the range and start looking at the results that I was able to get. First off is just the caveat that there is no magic bullet. I've talked about this ad nauseum in the past. When we look at ballistic results, whether it's in calibrated gel or water or whatever, it just gives us an idea of how those bullets might perform under optimal conditions when they are shot into a living human organism. We still have to rely on shot placement, so no matter how great the bullet performance is, if the shot placement is bad or if we miss, then that bullet is not going to do us any good no matter what the wounding potential might be if we had a good hit. The other thing I want to say is just a quick thank you to Dick Fairburn for explaining his process to me and for allowing me to use it during this video. So now let's head out to the range. The first bullet that I'm going to test is going to be that Remington 158 grain lead semi-wad cutter hollow point plus P load. Let's see how it performed. And here we go, folks. One round from the 158 grain Remington lead semi-wad cutter hollow point plus P. Let's see how it does. So the bullet went through one jug, two jugs, and it is caught just coming out of jug number 3. You can see that right there. Let's see if it cracked jug number 4 at all. It did crack jug number 4, so there's water coming out of jug number 4, and I will use Dick's computations to figure out exactly how that would equate to ballistic gel, and we'll go from there. So here is that Remington 158 grain lead semi-wide cutter hollow point. And I don't know if I mentioned this before, but the reason I went with Remington instead of the Winchester load is because the Winchester load is harder for me to get, and it's also considerably more expensive for some reason. I was able to get this Remington ammunition from Optics Planet. The price was a lot more reasonable, and I think the performance we're going to see is going to be comparable to what we would expect to see with that Winchester load. In any case, when I shot this out at the range, I found the bullet in jug number 3. It completely penetrated 2 jugs, and when I put that through Dick Fairburn's evaluation protocol, that would equate to a performance of about 12.9 inches of penetration in ballistic gel. It had a retained weight of 156.3 grains, which is virtually 100%. We don't know exactly how much this weighed before it was fired, but in any case, that's extremely good weight retention. And the expanded diameter is 0.605 inches, so it expanded to over 60 caliber, and I think that's very good performance. Now, 12.9 inches worth of penetration doesn't quite reach the penetration requirement for the FBI, but the FBI is basically looking at a worst case scenario where the bullet is traveling through an arm and in through the side of the body and has to penetrate as far as possible to reach vital organs and or central nervous system. I think for most applications that 12.9 inches, and if you think about penetrating your own body just about any direction you go, if a bullet is going to go 13 inches, that's going to be pretty good penetration in what I'll call the average human body. The expansion, like I said, very good, 60 caliber. So all in all, I would say that reputation that this load had back in the day was well deserved. I think that's good performance that we're seeing from this load from Remington. Next up is another old-time law enforcement 38 special loading. This is one that didn't have such a great reputation back in the day. Now, I was never issued this load either, but this is the 125 grain Federal Nyclad load. Now, Federal had an entire line of Nyclad ammunition that was in various different types of cartridges. This is going to be the 38 special version. I knew some officers that were issued this load and nobody had much good to say about it. But I thought, was that just a result of one or two bad situations where negative things happened when that load was used, or was that really a deserved reputation? Let's see how the 125 grain Nyclad bullet did. I am all set up once again. This is going to be the 125 grain Federal Nyclad hollow point. Let's see how it does. It does not appear that that Nyclad bullet did nearly as well as the 158 grain lead hollow point. It completely penetrated one jug. It did not completely penetrate the second jug. There is a slight dent right there in jug number 3. Let's see if I can find the bullet here. Once again, really nice expansion on that bullet, if I can get it where you can see it. So that definitely slowed it down as it was traveling through the water and limited its penetration. I will get the numbers calculated with this one and we'll see where it ends up out of this group of test ammo. Here is our 125 grain Federal Nyclad bullet after being recovered from the water jug. And if you wonder why it's called Nyclad, it's because these were essentially lead bullets that just had a nylon coating to prevent leading from the bore of the revolvers as they were fired. It really didn't do much as far as facilitating expansion. That just came as a result of the lead compound that was used. This ammunition had a published velocity of 830 feet per second, which sounds kind of slow for a 125 grain 38 special. I wish I could have gotten the actual velocity, but my chronograph still is trying to gasp for breath, and unfortunately I was not able to get that. This bullet was found in jug number 2. It only completely penetrated one jug, and when I run that through the conversion process here, that comes out to a penetration depth of 8.7 inches that we would expect to see in calibrated ballistic gel. So extremely shallow penetration. Now it did have a great expansion, and that's probably part of what limited the penetration. It expanded to 0.640 inches, so 64 caliber. The retained weight was 100%. It weighs 125 grains still. But that penetration really is not very good, and I would say we're seeing exactly why this particular ammunition had such a poor reputation back when it was issued to police officers. Next up is going to be the first of our more modern bullets, and this time around it's going to be a Hornady XTP. Now, Hornady's XTP bullets have been around since probably the early 1990s, so they're not an extremely new bullet, but they're one that I have used extensively. I've used a lot of their 44 caliber bullets for deer hunting, and they've always performed very well. I've used the 38 caliber or 357 caliber bullets a lot in my 38 Special and 357 Magnum ammunition, and it's always been a very, very good bullet. So I was expecting good things with this load. And the bullet that I'm going to be using is loaded in ammunition from House of Pain Munitions. It's loaded to a velocity of 847 feet per second. And let's see how that load did. And we're now ready for the 158 grain XTP hollow point from Hornady as loaded by House of Pain Munitions. Let's see what happens. I can tell just by looking at the jugs that we got a lot of penetration that time around. So it went completely through 1, 2, I think 3, actually not sure. Yeah, I think I hear the bullet rattling around in there. Yeah, there it is right there. It dented bucket number 5. So great penetration from the Hornady. Not a lot of expansion. Again, pretty much as I would expect with that kind of penetration. We won't see as much expansion. I've had good luck with these bullets using them for hunting, not specifically the 38 Special bullets, but the 44 caliber bullets as loaded into 44 Magnums, and I've always noticed them to penetrate really, really well, and the 38 Special loading is certainly no exception to that. So here is that Hornady XTP 158 grain hollow point bullet as loaded by House of Pain. Hop loads this to a velocity of 847 feet per second, and as we saw, the penetration with this bullet was tremendous. I found the bullet between jug number 4 and jug number 5. It actually cracked jug number 5. There was water leaking out of there. And when I run the numbers on that, that comes out to 20.64 inches we would expect to see with this bullet if it was fired into calibrated ballistic gel. Now, not surprisingly, the bullet expanded diameter was not that great. The diameter ended up being 0.488 inches, so it didn't even make it to 50 caliber. That's less than the 1.5 times expanded diameter that's considered optimal with hollow point ammunition. But even so, that's at 38 Special velocities. If I fired this out of a 357 Magnum at the higher velocity, we might see that bullet expand faster and it might limit the penetration some, and that might be a more effective bullet for defensive purposes at the 357 Magnum velocity. Even so, for any kind of a hunting application, I think this would be fantastic. The retained weight, interestingly enough, was actually just a little bit more than 158 grains. It's 158.5 grains that we have left over after this bullet was fired, so it picked up half a grain somewhere. Actually, it was probably just a little bit heavier than 158 grains to begin with. So, good performance with this. I think really this bears out my use for these bullets, which was for hunting applications, but if you want a good deep penetrating 38 Special load, this would be a good choice. The last 38 Special load I'm going to test is definitely the most modern and most high-tech of the entire group. This is going to be a Speer 135 grain Gold Dot hollow point, and this load came about, I'm going to say, about 10 years ago. It's specifically intended for use in short-barreled revolvers. This is loaded to a +P velocity, and out of the 4-inch barrel of the 686, we should see even better performance. Let's head out to the range and see how it did. And here we go with the Speer 135 grain +P hollow point loading. With that Gold Dot bullet, we got complete penetration of 1, 2, jugs. The bullet is in jug number 3, and there is a dent, but not a crack, in jug number 4. Beautiful expansion with that 135 grain gold dot. By the way, if you ever wondered why they're called gold dots, if you can see it, if I can get this to focus, right in the very center of the hollow point you see a little gold dot, and that's just a byproduct of the way they make these bullets, and that's where the bullet got its name. Here we have that 135 grain Speer Gold Dot plus P load. And as I said before, this is definitely the most modern and most high-tech of all the bullets that I am testing. Now this was intended for use, or maybe I should say optimized for use in short-barreled revolvers. So I'll make a comment on that as we go. But this has a published velocity of 860 feet per second. I don't know what Speer used for a barrel length to get that velocity, but that's the velocity I was able to come up with. This bullet ended up in jug number 3. It fully penetrated 2 of the jugs, and when I run the numbers on that, it comes out to 12.6 inches of penetration we could expect to see if we fired this into 10% calibrated ballistic gelatin. So actually, this is a little bit less than the penetration we saw with that 158 grain lead semi-wad cutter hollow point plus P that we started things off with. So that 50-year-old bullet, or maybe I should say 50-year-old load, 50-year-old technology, actually slightly outperformed this modern load. Now, here's the point that I was going to make with regard to barrel length. Since this is optimized for 2-inch barreled revolvers, it's possible that out of one of those revolvers with the shorter barrel, the bullet would achieve less velocity, meaning it would open more slowly and the penetration would have been slightly greater. There's a lot of maybes and possiblies and what have you there, but in any case, that is a possibility. The retained weight with this bullet was 134 grains, so essentially 100% weight retention. The expanded diameter was 0.582 inches, so actually I believe that lead hollow point slightly out expanded this as well. Let me flip back here and see wherever that one is. Of course, it'll take me forever to find the right page. There it is. Yes, the 158 grain lead semi-wide cutter hollow point expanded to slightly over 60 caliber. This one made it to just over 58 caliber. So not bad performance by any stretch, but certainly it is not outperforming the older load to the degree we would expect after 50 years worth of bullet technology and ammunition technology advancement. Next up is the 357 Magnum load that I decided to test. And I decided to test it because that's what was loaded in my 686 when I headed out to the range. And this is a load that I think is being produced again. For a while it went away, but I think it's back. This is the 125 grain Remington Golden Saber 357 Magnum load. Now this is, in terms of velocity, a mid-range load. It's loaded to a velocity of about 1,220 feet per second out of a 4-inch barrel. And I have chronographed that one before, and that's pretty much right where the velocity comes in. So if you're familiar with 125 grain 357s, you know that a lot of them are a lot faster than that. They're up in the 1,400 or faster feet per second range. This load is great for the older K-frame revolvers because it's not going to beat them to death, and it's also easier on the shooter. And I was just curious to see how it was going to perform compared to the 38 special loadings that I had been testing to that point. So let's head back out to the range and see how it did. And finally, the sole 357 Magnum load that I have with me out here today. This is the 125 grain Remington Golden Saber. definitely had a little bit more recoil from that one. And that bullet went through 1 jug, 2 jugs. It is in the 3rd jug, and there is no damage whatsoever to jug number 4. Once again, beautiful expansion from that 125 grain Remington Golden Saber. If I can get my camera to focus, which for some reason it doesn't like to do. So with the added velocity of the 357 Magnum, it expanded quicker, which limited the penetration. Here is a look at that 125 grain Remington Golden Saber 357 Magnum bullet. And the bullet expansion on this was tremendous. I think at that 357 Magnum velocity, this bullet just opened very quickly and we got great expansion. The penetration, however, was limited by that somewhat. This bullet was found in jug number 3. It marked the back of jug number 3, but did not put any mark whatsoever on jug number 4. When I run all those numbers, we would see, or expect to see, in calibrated ballistic gel a penetration of 11.61 inches. So it's a little shallow. Now certainly I would not want an 11+ inch hole going through my body, but I would like to have seen that just a little bit deeper. And this is kind of unusual because what I've seen in the past with Golden Saber loads is they tend to penetrate very, very deeply. In fact, there are sometimes they penetrate maybe a little more deeply than I would consider to be optimum. In any case, the expanded diameter was 60 caliber. The retained weight was 125.5 grains. So again, this probably started out just a little bit heavier than 125 grains. In any case, we had 100% weight retention. I still think out of the older K-frame Magnums, this is a pretty darn good load. And as I said, it's going to save wear and tear not only on your older revolver, but also on your older revolver shooters. So in any case, that was the way that 125 grain Golden Saber load turned out. So in a final analysis, I think here's what I can say with some confidence. First off, yes, that St. Louis PD load, the 158 grain lead semi-wad cutter plus P 38 special hollow point is a very good load. In fact, it slightly outperformed the modern 135 grain Speer Gold Dot. So yes, if you're still using that load, or you have a bunch of it, or you come across some of it somewhere, don't be afraid to carry it, because I think that's a pretty good 38 special load. The Speer loading also is pretty respectable. If I shot it out of a short barrel revolver that had a shorter barrel and it achieved a lower velocity, we might have seen a little bit more penetration. Maybe I'll try that in the future sometime, but still not bad. The Nyclad load pretty much looks like it deserved the reputation that it had back when I was talking to those officers in the day who carried it. I think that was not very good performance. The Nyclad ammunition is no longer being produced, and I would say that's probably a good thing. And lastly, the Hornady 38 special load. We saw great penetration if you were using that for any kind of hunting application or something like that, or if you just want a really deep penetrating load, then that XTP bullet is going to do it, and that's pretty much the type of performance I've always associated with those bullets. Now that's one that it might be interesting to shoot out of a 357 Magnum at the higher velocity, where we're going to see faster expansion. That might limit the penetration some. We might see greater expansion, so maybe we can take a look at that in the future. And the one 357 Magnum load that I tested, if you're carrying that in one of the old K-frame Magnums or something like that, it's not going to be uncontrollable when you shoot it, even though you're getting much higher velocity than you would get with a 38 special load, but you're still not getting all of the blast and all the recoil you would get with a full power 357 Magnum. So that's going to pretty much do it for today. By the way, if you like this kind of testing, let me know. I can try to do more of it in the future. It's a little bit of a chore getting all those milk jugs together, loading them up with water, getting them out to the range, getting everything ready to go. By the way, in the future, I won't put my chronograph right in front of the water. I'll figure out a different way to do that. But anyway, like I said, let me know. I can do this in the future, maybe some more. We can try some different cartridges. I can look at 9mm, 40 Smith & Wesson, whatever. But let me know in the comments section what you think. And that's going to do it for the video today. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks again to Roy Kiefer for suggesting this topic. And also thanks to Dick Fairburn for letting me use his bullet testing protocol. Also, be sure to check out HR Funk. There is all kinds of great information there, including product information from manufacturers like Optics Planet, House of Pain, Targets Online. There are discount codes there. Just check out the product information section and you can find all of that listed there. By the way, I've had a great response since I launched the website. Thanks to all of you who have gone there and checked it out. So until next time, folks, good shooting. Bye-bye.